To give context, I used to be a 911 dispatcher for a small city. We dispatched all law, fire, EMs for the entire county, and within this county were multiple law agencies. I had been there for about 3 months or so when I met him. Let's call him Jake. Jake had recently transferred from a big department in California and landed himself randomly at our department. It didn't make much sense as to why he left California in the first place, but he always insisted it was just time for him to move to a smaller, less dangerous department. Him and I quickly became close and would chat almost every day after I got off shift. Within a few months, it became apparent that we liked each other, and our flirting progressed into something more serious. Fast forward a few months later, and it turns out he was doing some inappropriate things to photos, videos of me, whilst he was actively on duty. This and a few other things he had kept hidden on duty lead to him losing his license and leaving. During the process of his termination, his SGT had suggested I get a protective order against him, as he had made threatening statements previously towards me, such as, "You better be telling the truth. I'll find out on Tuesday if you're lying to me," etc. I had begun to fill out the paperwork and was told I had a temporary protective order on him in the meantime, but don't think I ever did. About 2 weeks after his termination, he calls me to catch up. The entire call is like an old friend to an old friend. What am I doing for work? Do I have a boyfriend now? But progressively turns more personal. When does my shift end? What do I drive? Being 18 and naive, I treated him like I always had, answering his questions. I had contacted his old department afterwards, as his SGT had told me to let him know if I was ever contacted again, but they turned me away pretty quickly and didn't want anything to do with it. With that, I blocked Jake. Roughly a month later, I get a call from a new number, and it's Jake. Once again, he wants to meet up and catch up, but this time he so casually goes on to tell me about this new house he's wanting to buy in my neighborhood, knowing it's my neighborhood. I had never told him where I lived in town, let alone what specific neighborhood. During this call, he progressively got more aggressive as well, making statements such as, "If I knew I was going to get canned, I should have just had my way with you." He half-heartedly joked about getting a hotel room just for me, and that was that. A few days later, he FaceTimed me, and once again came off as simply wanting to catch up as he was sick. Midway through our seemingly normal conversation, he makes it apparent he's been touching himself this entire time. Keep in mind, nothing suggestive was mentioned, and our conversation at that point was about his new dog. He's blocked once again, but has tried to follow my social media, and now I've started to see him in my area. Last I knew, he lived nearly 45 minutes in the opposite direction from me. Am I reading into this, or should I genuinely consider this stalking? In June of this year, I moved out of my parents' apartment as I finally got a steady job and longed for some sort of freedom. I looked for apartments that were affordable in my city and found one that's a 2 or 3 minute walk from my parents' apartment. To me, it was perfect. I'd get to live alone, and my parents would still be nearby so I could visit them whenever I wanted, or pop in to have breakfast with them. The apartment itself is great. It's not really much to look at, but for a single male, it's more than enough. My apartment has a long corridor connecting each room together from the sides, with my front door being at the start of the corridor. My bedroom is the second room on the left, but since the walls are pretty thin, you can literally hear people in the apartment complex walking, talking, etc., from my bedroom, and any room for that matter. Last week, I came home from the pub after meeting up with a few friends. It wasn't really late, around 10:15 or 10:30-ish, and I had the day off, so I took a shower and hopped into bed to watch Netflix. It was probably around midnight when I heard a faint knock coming from the front door. I stopped the show that I was watching and listened for a minute or so, and just thought that it was my mind playing tricks on me. I continued watching Netflix when once again I heard a 2-motion knock on my door. I sat up from bed, went to the door, and looked through the peephole, and sure enough, it was pitch black. I once again shrugged it off and went back to my room. But before I could even sit down properly, I heard a slightly louder knock-knock. At this point, I thought it was my friends playing a prank on me, so I called my friend and asked if he was knocking on my door, and if he was, it wasn't amusing. He paused for a second and said, "Dude, I'm at home. I have to be up at like 7:30 inches." I believed him and hung up the phone. I was talking pretty loudly, so whoever was knocking probably heard me. And as soon as I hung up, I heard another knock. At this point, I was pretty pissed off, so I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw nothing. I then unlocked the door, took a peek, and closed the door and locked it. Me being angry and a bit intoxicated, I decided to wait and catch whoever was knocking, so I spent a solid 10 minutes silently looking through the peephole before being a bit startled as someone put their hand over the peephole and knocked again. I immediately started unlocking the door and ran out to the apartment hall. I heard someone booking it down the steps and heard him, supposedly, lean against the wall as his jacket shrugged the wall, so I ran a few steps down before realizing that whoever this is was waiting behind the corner to get the jump on me. I hurried back inside and called the cops. They were there within a few minutes and scanned the building and the street, but couldn't find anyone. They told me that it could just be some kids pulling a prank and to never run after someone. They kept a patrol car around the entire night, and the knocking stopped. It could have been some kids being dumb, but the part that gave me the fucking creeps was the fact that whoever it was ran down the stairs and stopped behind the corner. He didn't keep running. If it were some pranksters, I find it more likely that they would have just booked it outside. As I said, it's been a week, and the knocking stopped. It kept me on edge for a few days because I just expected to be jumped by someone when walking into my apartment, but so far nothing has come of it. I've let it go and just hope that it won't happen again. My name is Anastasia, and a few days ago, something happened that makes me sick. We moved to an East Coast town about a year ago to be closer to family. So close, in fact, that my aunt, her wife, and my cousins are only a 10-minute walk from my house. Granted, we are very spaced out and borderline rural, despite living about 15 minutes from the outskirts of a big city. I was walking my two little dachshunds back home from my aunt's house. My mom hates it when I'm alone the majority of the day, so I spend time at their house, and I was genuinely enjoying my time. It was cold but quiet and oddly beautiful. I got home, fed my pups and two birds, and FaceTimed a friend. I was talking with them and doing chores, and was admittedly being loud and giggly when taking out the trash to the cans on the side of my house. I get back inside and lay down in bed still chatting when my bird starts calling at something. Now, anyone who has owned a parrot knows that they have distinct noises for certain moments. She's been in my family for 76 years, and with me my whole life, so I knew the sound was alarm intrigue. I brush it off as her seeing herself in the window reflection and go back to talking to my friend. I get up to get water, and my back is to the sliding glass door, thankfully locked, and my friend has the wind knocked out of him. I'm confused and think he's hurt. He tells me, "Nastia, go back to your room now." I scoff, but then I see it in my camera view. There is a man with his face and hands pressed up against the glass door. He's a middle-aged white guy in a gray pullover and dark pants and a grin on his face. My friend, ever the best in panicked situations, tells me, "Don't look at him, just go to your room." I was shaking so hard. I'm blubbering and decide to lock me and my dogs in my closet. My parrot is still going crazy. English isn't my first language, and it's bad when I'm shocked, so I revert back to my native language, which he doesn't know. Luckily, my friend knows to take charge, and he tells me he'll be over in 10, and he calls the police. I'm thinking I can run to my mom's room and find the gun, so if the guy comes in the house, I can blow a quarter-sized hole in his chest. I'm debating getting up when I hear tapping on my window. It's slow and intentionally creepy, and my stupid dogs start barking. I'm ready to accept my death. I'm a teenage girl, home alone, and I'm about to die. Wait, my aunt should about to be leaving for work. I shoot her a quick text. The tapping has stopped, and I think it's over when I realize something that makes my balls drop into my chest. I left the front door unlocked when I took out the trash. This keeps getting worse, and I beg my friend to hurry. The tapping returns to my window, and I can only close my eyes and hope that someone gets here fast. It feels like an eternity, crying like someone breaking multiple traffic laws. Never before have I been grateful to hear another man's voice yelling outside my house at 1 a.m. It was my neighbor. Apparently his pregnant wife was having bad nausea and went out on the deck, where you can see my whole backyard. She got a bad feeling after seeing the man approach my door and woke her husband to check it out. I'll thank God every day for her, because I think she saved my life. I let my neighbors into my house, and my aunt comes a few minutes later, and my friend not long after her, and the police come 10 minutes later. I go from home alone to a full house party of concerned people. On the bright side, my bird wasn't too alerted by this encounter and went back to eating 5 minutes later. My dogs were just happy to see people. My friend has been staying the nights with me since. I'm finding it hard to be home alone, despite the fact that an arrest was made. I'm so thankful that my neighbor had such good instincts, and that my aunt and friend were so quick on their feet, because this could have been a lot worse. This took place the summer of 2022, and I just never thought of writing down this story because I was so stunned that it happened to me. So every summer in my city, me and my friends like to make small campfires in chill, secluded areas because we don't want to drive an hour to an actual campsite and pay any campsite fee to do so. These also happen pretty spontaneously, so it's a nice last-minute hang to do. There's this one spot near my house that's located by a river that's really nice because no one usually goes there. The only thing to be worried about are bears, though, because living in the Pacific Northwest is challenging like that, and my house specifically is located right next to mountains and forest. So one particular night at 11 p.m., I decide to go ahead of my friends and meet them at the spot and set things up early because I want us to be chilling once they all get there. The spot I get to has a 2-minute paved walkway I have to go through, and then I have to take a small trail ramping down the right side of the bridge that crosses over the river. Along this paved walkway is 2 lamps located at halfway and another at the start of the bridge, the ramp down to the campfire spot. I park my car at the beginning of the trail on the street and bring my campfire stuff like flashlight, lighter, small firewood, small shovel to dig out the pit, etc. I get to the spot, and it's a small sandy beach kind of embankment on the side of the river with a small waiting area for toddlers with their families during the hot summers. So I set up the chair, and I get to digging the pit with only my flashlight illuminating where I'm digging. I'm also just shoveling the sand right next to me, nowhere near the water, but all of a sudden, I hear a loud splash. A splash so loud that it can only come from something equally large, like a 2-hand-sized rock. I'm confused because I swear I'm not throwing my sand into the water, even though I'm only a few feet away. I shine my flashlight at the water, and I don't see anything, so I kind of just brush it off, thinking I'm just hearing things. But as I keep shoveling a bit more, I hear another loud splash. At this point, I think something is falling from above, because logically something must be falling into the water. I point the flashlight above where some trees are above the river, and I don't see anything big enough to make the splash. So as I keep digging, with my heart rate kind of going at this point, I hear a rustling past the arch of where the bridge goes over the river. I quickly grab my light and shine it towards where I heard the rustling. I call out, "Hello?" No response. In my head, if it was a bear, I should be getting out of there immediately, but there was no bear, or signs of anything for that matter. So I tell myself, I'm just hearing things now because I've seen horror movies before, and now my mind is playing tricks on me. But I hear the noise again, and it clearly sounds like leaves being rustled, so I shine my flashlight over to the area again, and as I focus my eyes towards the illuminated area, I see the naked back of a man hunched over. I was kind of frozen in anxiety and stress, because honestly, of all the things I was to see, I didn't think I'd see the naked back of a man. From the quick analysis my brain could muster up, he looked to be mid-40s, shaved not bald and medium-ish build, like a mix between chubby and built. As I had my flashlight staying on his back, he started to stand up, and the first thing I noticed was that he wasn't wearing any pants either. My next reflex was to start packing up all my crap and getting the hell out of there because now I'm piecing in my head that he must have been throwing things into the water to scare or shoo me away. So after using my reflexive deductive skills, I proceeded to speed walk out of there with all my stuff. I'm carrying all my things with me and briskly walk up the small ramp, and I'm on the paved path now out of the forest. I can feel my heart beating in my chest, and I am frequently looking back to make sure I'm not being followed. I'm in Crocs, mind you, so I'm hoping that if I have to book it out of there, I'd regret not being in sport mode from the get-go. I make it to the halfway point, and a sense of relief starts setting in, knowing I made it safely out of this very scary situation. But as I check behind me for the final time, I see something. Slowly creeping over the ramp is the naked man crawling on all fours as if he was primate walking. His head was positioned towards me, looking at me as he made his way to the middle of the paved walkway. He slowly gets up from his stance and starts standing on his feet, and positions his body to face me. After setting himself into his new position, the man starts running towards me. I freaking book it. I run as hard as I can down the path. My flashlight jumped out of my pocket and I lost it, but I didn't care because a whole naked-ass man was chasing me at 11 p.m. at night in a secluded forest. I looked back for a split second, and the man was still running towards me, still completely naked. He could have my flashlight for all I care. I wanted to make it out of this situation alive. I finally make it out of the forest, and I run to my car, which is only 30 feet away from the end of the forest. I desperately get to my car, and like a classic horror movie, I fumble with trying to get my key fob to unlock my car. I actually drop my keys and quickly think to myself, I'm actually dead. But I brush the thought off and pick them back up. I get my fob properly, unlock my doors, and throw my things into my back seat before getting into my car. This felt like an eternity, but in hindsight, most likely took 6 seconds altogether. As I try to guide my key into the ignition, I am fixated on the end of the paved path that I was just at a few seconds ago, waiting to see if the naked man was coming still. I feel my key go into the ignition, and I switch my sights onto the road in front of me, and I zoom out of the area as fast as possible. As I drive away and I'm a good 30 seconds from the location of the horror that just took place, I get a call on my phone. It was my friends calling me asking if I made it to the spot yet, and all I say to them is, "Guys, do I have a crazy story to tell you?" They pull up to my house because, again, it was actually decently close to the campfire area, and I tell them the whole story the way that I told it just now. They swear that it was none of them trying to prank me or anything like that, and I also knew none of them would try to full sprint at me with their dong out. But as we're just talking out in front of my house, there's a college student who looks like he's walking home that's going towards the direction of where I encountered the naked man. I just yelled out to him, "You be careful! There's a naked guy that was chasing me by the bridge that crosses over the river." He responds saying, "Oh damn, really? I gotta go over that bridge to go home." All I tell him is, "Good luck, man." The next day, I reported it to the police by phone, but they sent over an officer so I could tell them in person and show them where in the area I saw these things. When we went to see where I initially saw the man's back hunched over, they said they didn't see any trace of anyone being there previously, but the officer said they would make note of it anyways in case it happens again. Some friends say it's a skinwalker. Others say more realistically, it's either a homeless, mentally ill, or a drunk high person. One theory I've heard my friends say is that it's a future version of me pulling a prank on past version of me, because honestly, when time travel is real, I would totally screw with my younger self like that. I live in a college town with 6 other young girls in our 20s. The city we live in is not that nice and has a huge homeless drug problem where break-ins are not unusual. However, what happened last Saturday was defiantly strange. My roommates and I, as well as some of our boyfriends, were hanging out and drinking in our house, while 2 of the girls opted to go out to a bar. By around 1 a.m., the 2 girls came home from the bar, and everyone was tired, so we all went to our own respective rooms. Later in the night, I was awoken by someone opening my door and standing in my room, staring at me. In my head, I thought that it was one of my roommate's boyfriends trying to see if my boyfriend and I were still awake to continue to party. Since I was tired, I pretended to be asleep to avoid being bugged. After a bit, the person closes my door and proceeds to pace back and forth in the hallway. They then begin to attempt to open my roommate's door, whose room is right next to mine. Luckily, her door was locked, and she also had her boyfriend with her. The person then proceeds to go into our utensils drawer and grabs a knife to attempt to pick her lock. After gaining some courage, her boyfriend shouts, "Who the fuck is that?" which startles the man, who then sprints up the stairs and out the door. Police were called and did a search, but didn't find anything. They told us break-ins were normal, which we knew. However, what makes this whole scenario creepier is that he didn't steal anything. My phone, alcohol, and $600 shoes were untouched. We also suspect that this person was not on drugs or alcohol, as he moved very quietly and deliberately. He was able to get in because the two girls who came home from the bar did not lock the door behind them. I'm not sure what this man's intent was, but I am forever grateful that I happened to have my boyfriend with me, which is not often as he lives 3 hours away, and pretended to be asleep. It gives me chills thinking that a strange man was in my room, and what could have happened to me if I was alone.
If you like this story and want to see more, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing this video.